the TMZ Behind the Bar podcast with the TMZ lawyers, Jason Beckerman and Tarek Kaufman.
All right, welcome everyone to the Behind the Bar podcast. Happy to be here. Derek, it is our 22nd episode.
Oh my God, 22nd episode spectacular?
22nd episode, Double Deuce, Catch 22, my favorite novels of all time. So
interesting. Joseph Heller.
Joseph Heller,
Wonderful
that's right.
book, yes.
Well, we've had hundreds of thousands of listeners. As I always say, pull out your iPhones. Even those of you who are watching on YouTube, pull out your iPhones, go to the podcast store. Just subscribe to the Behind the Bar podcast. Your little search, TMZ Behind the Bar. Press subscribe. You never have to do anything ever again as long as you live.
That's it.
Press that subscribe button. It helps us a ton. Please, please, please. I'm Jason Beckerman.
I'm Tarek Kaufman.
Derek, on Monday, we broke the story, not the store.
Well, you may have broken into stores as well.
We broke the story about Tarek and Christine Moussa, the stars of the wildly successful. I was looking up the ratings for the show.
It's
They're
a huge
unbelievable.
show.
Flip or Flop on HGTV, where they sort of buy a house in Orange County.
They buy a dump.
They buy a dump.
Fix it up.
And they fix it up in the course of a half-hour episode, and they flip it. My wife and I are semi-obsessed with the show.
I'm so into it. It's them or the Property Brothers. It's a neck-and-neck race in our house.
That's right, and the thing we liked about them, well, I didn't really care, but the thing my wife liked about it, and I was talking last night to her about it, is sort of the really good relationship that the two of them appear to have on screen.
It's wholesome. I mean,
It's wholesome.
Tarek and Christina Moussa are this couple. They're from the OC, and they look very OC, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
They just look like a couple. She's a blonde-haired, petite woman. He's sort of a bigger guy. They got a cute little kid.
Yeah.
I think they have a second kid now. They ran into some marital difficulties, and we broke a huge story on. So back in May, there was an incident where Tarek came to a home, not their family home, but a home that maybe was being worked on. Their home. And he runs upstairs. He sees something that's very disconcerting, runs upstairs, grabs a 9mm from his safe, runs out of the house, and goes up to a hiking trail nearby.
Let me stop you.
Yeah, this is in your building,
saw
I believe.
something disconcerting. It seems like you're tiptoeing around something. We don't know what he saw exactly, right?
We
There's
don't
been
know.
rumors flying
That's
about
right.
what he might have encountered when he walked in the home. But whatever it is that he encountered, his wife was there. We know that.
She wasn't at that particular moment in that area, but yes, in the vicinity.
She was in the vicinity.
Yes.
But he comes to this home. She's somewhere in the vicinity. He sees something that is very disconcerting. He grabs a 9mm pistol out of the bedside. I'm picturing the bedside table. I don't know where he grabbed it from.
From a safe. It was
From a
actually
safe.
in his bedroom. He
Okay.
runs up to his bedroom, grabs a 9mm from a safe, and darts out the door.
And darts out the door.
And seems upset. He's sort of silent, stern, angry.
Based on whatever he had just seen upon walking in the vicinity where his wife happened to be. We don't know anything more.
That's right. Now, the witnesses, there was a makeup artist who's a friend of Christina's in the bedroom at the time who said he was almost kind of catatonic, went in there very seriously, took the 9mm and ran out. So she calls Christina and says, this is upsetting. Your husband just grabbed a gun, ran out of the house, and now he's in the woods somewhere or hiking in a trail.
Right.
So this sets off a flurry of events where Christina is very upset. She's shaking. She's sobbing. Police are called. They come, and they say there's a possibly suicidal male out there in the hills.
That's what Christina and this makeup artist sort of suggested
And
them.
one other witness, yes.
And one of the witnesses suggested them that he might be suicidal.
That's right. And one of the witnesses we've since learned is a male.
Right.
So there was sort of speculation that maybe there's marital infidelity going on or something. But this is a very wholesome couple, so it's a very strange event. So now Tarek is hiking out there with a 9mm.
Right.
Cops come out. They get Duke. This is a famous OC helicopter that they deploy, which is named after...
I would assume John Wayne.
It's John Wayne. It's like their airport. So Duke is up in the air, yelling down at a man and saying, "Drop your weapon." And it's Tarek Moussa, the star of HGTV's Flip or Flop.
Can we digress for a second?
Sure.
Has any notorious racist been sort of honored quite the way that we have honored John Wayne throughout the history?
Oh, my goodness.
Of cinema, Hollywood cinema.
It's hard to imagine one. Off the top of my head, I can't think of one. John Wayne is
If
way
you guys
up
don't
there.
know about the story, just do us a favor. After the podcast is over or while you're listening to the podcast, go and just Google John Wayne racist comments, and you will see some of the most hate-filled statements.
He's got a
you've ever
Bartlett's
seen.
book amongst himself of
He's
just
really
like hate-filled.
almost profound in his racism.
It really is. There's a sort of literary flair to it.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Back to Orange County.
so Duke is up above, and they say, "Put down the weapon, sir." And he's hiking, and eventually they stop Tarek, and he says, "I was just up here blowing off steam. Nothing to amiss here. I actually
Yeah.
brought the 9mm with me while I hike into the hills because there's rattlesnakes and mountain lions. So he says, not suicidal. This is all blown way out of proportion, but it's obviously a big story. We since learned that they're separated.
They're separated,
Yeah.
and a couple of other things happen. I mean, first, his story that he just went up there for a hike is really at odds with this idea that he went in and was angry or very upset and grabbed a gun out of the safe and then really fled, running up into the hills. So much so that a manhunt really was undertaken.
Right. I like to used to say that this strains credulity, right?
It
We used to
strains
write this
credulity.
in your
In
briefs
legal briefs.
because it is plausible.
Yeah.
Sure, that someone runs into
Just
their
to
house,
sit down.
grabs a gun to go for a hike. Seems implausible.
Right, especially given the circumstances. And then I have a question for you about sort of criminal liability, because they came back in, cops did, and they found five weapons, including an AR-15.
I believe there's an AR-15 in there, and he actually voluntarily relinquished them. So we don't know, they weren't seized necessarily. He
Right.
said, "Okay, you found me in
Well,
the
they
hills
asked
with a gun,"
him,
and
"Do
they
you
said,
have
"Would you
to-"
hand these over?"
Yes.
because you may be suicidal, and we don't know what's going on right now. So they take all of his weapons.
Yes.
He has permits for them.
Okay.
So he has a concealed carry permit, and maybe even a permit, I guess, for the AR-15, which I don't think you can carry around California.
No.
Texas maybe, but
Yeah, no, you can't. You definitely can't do that. But as far as we know, there are no criminal charges.
nothing.
I wonder about the civil liability. He started this event. 11 police officers were called to the scene. The helicopter was called to the scene. The cost, the man hours, the cost is extraordinary. I mean, you're talking in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Is this the kind of thing that the city of Corona del Mar, I believe it is?
I think it was Yorba Linda. Is it Corona del Mar?
Chino Hills.
Chino Hills.
It was the
Sorry.
city of Chino Hills, whether they can go after him to get recompense, because as a taxpayer in California, if I lived in the OC, if I lived in Chino Hills, you all pay taxes. I would assume that it's the city police of Chino Hills. There's a cost involved.
Oh,
there.
they had to gas up Duke.
They
I
had
mean,
to-
that cost the taxpayers money.
and it's 11 people that are being taken off of the streets. The crime.
No, this
happens.
has real costs.
Yeah.
There's monetary costs, and there's the cost of removing the officers and having them on something that turned out to be nothing. I don't think they can impose these costs on the El Moussas or on the makeup artist who was distraught and sees him run in. The reason is I don't think anything intentional was done. Now, if I call up the police as a prank to swat somebody, there's certainly liability, and that's very common
I know there's
now.
specific legislation on that. If you make false allegations in a police report, typically you see it in a false alarm for a fire, and the fire department is called out, you will be assessed a pretty hefty, multiple thousands of dollars penalty for doing so.
That's right. And the one thing that you can impose without any sort of intentional wrongdoing is I've seen ambulance fees. You often get tagged with this. If you call the ambulance to your house and the city services send out the ambulance to transport you to the hospital, you'll get a bill later. And
Don't
it's
get
disconcerting.
Siobhan started on the one time she had to call an ambulance.
I know
I
I think she's still paying it down. So anyway, that's where the story is now. They're separated, living separate lives. We just broke a story today that she is actually dating the other witness who was there, this male named Gary, who has never been featured on the show, but he's a cabinet guy.
So this is obviously not the first story, Derek, that TMZ has broken about reality stars running afoul of the law. It's frankly, I think reality stars doing bad things is as old as like the flood, right? I mean, this goes back thousands of years of reality.
Well, I think it only goes back as far as reality television.
That would be probably a more precise. I mean, if you want to be that precise. Joe and Teresa Guiducci, they once wanted Giudici?
Yes.
Thank you. Convicted of wire and bank fraud. She did 15 months. He's doing 41 months in federal prison for wire and bank fraud.
This was massive. They faced, I think, 50 years apiece.
Yeah.
So they cut a plea deal, but they did massive bank and bankruptcy
The fact
fraud.
that he's doing nearly 4 years in prison, that's a long period of time for white-collar crimes.
It is. They think he was the figurehead and sort of the mastermind, and she sort of followed along with what her husband said and falsified whatever documents that he said to falsify. He's got bigger problems. I don't know if you know. He is actually an Italian.
Yeah, so they're going to deport him. That was part of the order, that there's an order of deportation for him.
Yeah, there's a chance because he committed a serious felony that when he gets out, he will actually be sent back to Italy. He's got 3 daughters. So regardless of what you think of the Giudices, it's a pretty serious situation for their family and sort of tearing it apart.
Well, presumably she could move with the children to Italy and they could be together as a family.
She could. It's hard to imagine the Giudices.
Would you? I wouldn't mind moving to Italy with the fam.
Maybe not. I don't think they speak the language. It'd be a little bit disorienting, but yeah.
There we go. The situation from Jersey Shore, we all know he committed fraud as well, forgeries. allegedly. Faces up to 11 years in prison.
He has other problems with his tanning salon. He didn't pay his people.
That's right.
And so he's had
He's accused of battering his brother, who they got into a fight, and this whole thing.
Yeah, lots of situations.
Kim Richards from Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. She was accused in 2015 of striking a police officer during a melee at a nightclub or a restaurant. She was released from prison 6 months later. She stole $600 worth of goods from Target, and despite she has great family wealth.
Yep.
Notwithstanding that, she stole $600. There were some mental issues that were talked about
substance
there.
abuse,
some substance abuse issues. Chum Lee from Pawn Stars, one of the craziest stories. I mean, this guy's a little bit off kilter as it was. But the cops raided his house because there were allegations of sexual assault. There were even some allegations that the sexual assault involved people under the age of 18 years old.
Yeah, we got that video of he had like a strip club in his house, and then they found guns and weapons.
Yeah,
drugs.
Raided,
as well.
and there were guns and meth and a bunch of other drugs. He faces charges for both. Abby Lee Miller from Dance Moms. I mean, the list goes on and on. Accused of tax and bankruptcy fraud. This seems to be sort of the most obvious and most recurring example that we see is this fraud. And we'll get into this in just a second. Many others. Apollo Nida from Real Housewives of Atlanta, Snooki from Jersey Shore. The list really does go on and on.
It's remarkable, yeah.
And Derek, I know that you like to dabble quite a bit in sort of the psychiatric causes for certain behaviors.
Yep.
Kind of a side hobby of yours. The behaviors, both criminal and otherwise. What's your take on all this? Why do these things continuously happen to reality shows stars? Or better said, why do reality show stars continue to engage in this kind of illicit behavior?
Yeah, you know I'm interested in this stuff. My sister is actually a real psychiatrist. Dr. Jason Seaver just passed away, so this seems apropos. You know, Alan Thicke.
I'm going to let that one slide.
No, don't let it slide. So anyway, I wanted to dive into sort of what's going on with the mental health and the behavior of these reality stars, because it happens a lot. I actually looked also, the New York Post tallied that there were 21 suicides in the past decade among reality show stars. So it's not just criminal conduct, but also just destabilizing behavior of these shows. And a lot of people are attributing it. So you and I were talking about whether it's the reality shows themselves that are attracting people with maybe a propensity for misconduct or off-kilter behavior, or does the participation in the reality shows create this inclination, or are the people already like that?
I was phrasing
sort
it
of a chicken and egg
Yeah,
problem.
as a chicken and egg. It's a ham-handed way to put it. But again, is the problem before they get in the reality show, or does the reality show create the problem? And I think the answer's got to be a little bit of both.
I think
right?
the answer is a little bit of both, and I know that's sort of unsatisfying. My sense, though, is that it's more the creation of the problem by the reality shows. And the reason I say this is because I looked into it, and the way these reality shows are designed is sort of to prey on any sort of weaknesses in character or phobias that you have, or any inclination that you may have to deviate from the norm to create drama and create ratings and create something that is exciting to watch. They sort of tap into that. So I think the reality show is actually looking for that. And if you have any of it in your character, even an inkling that is usually suppressed in the real world, they'll find it and they'll bring it out. And the way they do this is a lot of the shows have these huge psychological evaluations. They subject you to a 500-question psychological evaluation just to get on American Idol. So American Idol, and what they find in these questions is, what are your fears? How messy is your background? What's your criminal background? Have you ever been sued? Have you ever been shoplifting? All these things. And then they thrust you in these situations often, and not on American Idol,
but other shows. For the purpose
of
creating drama that's attached to the show, they will highlight these things, and they will also allow the other competitors to draw them out of you as a way of sort of, again, creating the drama that these reality shows are based on. You know, I think the one thing that we've learned about reality shows more than anything else in the years we've been working here is that there's no reality. There's very little reality in reality television. I mean, putting aside the competition shows, the American Idols and those kind of things, so there's some reality there.
That's right.
But in these Real Housewives shows and the others, the conflicts are are creation of the producers. Not to say that the actual way in which the conflict manifests itself is not real. There are fights, they are real. There are screaming matches. There is dislike among the contestants, but the construct of it all is produced and manufactured.
The conditions are set. I think that's the way to sort of think about it, is they put you in a situation where they know that even the slightest match will ignite the flame. And that's what they do. And the way they do it is they'll see, do you have a messy past? So maybe they bring back an old boyfriend or an old relative relative, or they'll put you in a situation where your roommate is someone who psychologically you guys will not get along.
Yeah.
And so I think that's very interesting. It's engineered. You
Right,
know?
it is.
So the conflict is engineered, and then there's real world consequences of having a fight with someone. Even on a reality show, battery's battery. There's criminal conduct that can go on camera.
So, Derek, let me interrupt you for a second. I think we have someone on the line who can explain all of this to us. Let's get Richard Hatch's take on this.
Survivor.
Richard Hatch, as everybody knows, is really the OG of reality stars, as we like to call him.
He's the winner of the biggest and the first.
He was the winner of the first episode of Survivor, won the $1 million cash prize. This was, at the time, the biggest show on television, and he was a large reason for that. Richard obviously went on not only to win Survivor, then get caught up in an alleged failure to pay the taxes on the $1 million in winnings. He ended up serving 51 months in federal prison. He has long denied the allegations that were posed against him, but nevertheless, he went to a jury. The jury convicted him of the crimes, and he served 51 months. And I think there's nobody better to talk about this issue of what happens. Why is it that we see so many reality stars that fall on tough times after the shows are finished taping?
Yeah, let's see what he thinks about whether these reality shows are casting or attracting people who already have problems, or whether the reality shows themselves are creating these problems in people.
Richard, what do you think about all this?
I won Survivor more than 16 years ago.
Yeah.
This might be the first meaningful conversation about this that I've encountered in the press or in people asking about it. I'm fascinated. I'm writing a book called Reality Matters about what's true. And what you're touching on is bigger than just reality television. So yeah, chicken or the egg. It's both. I think good people who select contestants, effective contestant placement is a big part of it. So they look for people with personality, people with opinion, people with energy. But it's also bizarre what happens afterward and how others perceive those of us who were on these shows.
That's interesting. So my question is, I know Survivor was sort of 16 years ago, and I'm interested at the sort of which plays a bigger role, or the intersection of the two things that are happening, because the conditions on the show, obviously there's nothing more extreme than what goes on Survivor, right? Is that what's causing sort of the behavioral change, or is it the immediate aftermath when you're thrust back to, let's call it, normal life?
On the show, the dynamics are fascinating in and of themselves. There's the contest among contestants, and there's a whole other dynamic that goes on between, say, producers and the individual, and the logistics of what's taking place. That's fascinating. But after the show and the media and how one becomes approached, perceived very, very differently from how one might perceive themselves.
You sort of took on the role. I was a big fan early on of Survivor, back when I guess over 20 million people a week were watching it.
It was beating Friends.
It was beating Friends in the ratings, yeah. And I was a big fan. And you positioned yourself as somewhat of the villain on the show, right?
Well, let's start with that. That's
okay.
Exactly to your point.
Yep.
I didn't position myself as the villain. So here I am playing this game, thought it out intensely before I even went out there. So I was so prepared.
And it showed. You were much better than everybody else in the show by a long way.
And with the detail that they gave me, I had decided how I was going to interact with everybody, how I was going to play, what I needed to do, that I needed to build an alliance. All these things that I'd thought of as intelligent, for which I'd imagined, given how we treat football players, et cetera, I would have been lauded. I thought, wow, people are going to just be amazed. Look at him. He's really got it,
Well, that's funny, because that's the way I perceived it. I mean, I thought that the biggest tool at your disposal was your mental edge over the other competitors, because there's obviously physical challenges, and you did well at both aspects of the game. But I think even you would say that your advantage was in the psychological sort of warfare that you could play.
100%. But you're an attorney, so go with me here as I make my case. We are not right. We, general public, are not thinking that. Most people did not see what you saw. Most people thought of me as a manipulative, Machiavellian, angry, this villain that they loved to hate. So your perception is rare.
So what was more jarring for you afterwards? You were all of a sudden very famous, and I did a little bit of research on your past before the show, and you were not famous. So you were all of a sudden famous. You were all of a sudden famous, not necessarily, as we've just been discussing, in an entirely positive light. And you also had, money now that you hadn't had before. You won $1 million for winning on Survivor. These three things. What was the most jarring for you coming out on the other side? The vilification, the fame, or the money?
So the fame was of no consequence. I couldn't have cared less. I was interested in winning for the money. What was most jarring was the vilification. I had no preparation for or awareness that the media wouldn't have been utterly supportive, like blown away by how well I played and cheering on the sports team, the guy who won. I thought they would appreciate that.
Do you blame the editing on Survivor at all for that? Were sort of what do you think that was highlighted, the sort of darker side of Richard Hatch? Was that highlighted in the filming, or you just think it was simply perception?
Okay, I don't blame the editing, which people are often surprised by, because there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours filmed, and everything they showed was of me. But it is edited, and it's just a very small portion of one's personality. So I can't blame editors who put together a very accurate depiction of what actually unfolded.
We have talked to a lot of different folks who have been in your position, not necessarily the winners, but other people who have appeared in these shows. And the one complaint that we hear universally, and you're the first person to depart from that, is that they edited me in a way that made me look worse than I am.
And I have to say it's the single most refreshing thing I've heard, because all shows are edited.
Yeah.
I mean, there's too much footage then we create a show every day filming for 2 hours to create a half an hour. That's just what you do. Yeah.
Correct. What the editors want is to most accurately show what actually took place so that the viewers can follow, so they can get excited by it, so they can be interested in the story that unfolded. Their job isn't to portray me as fully a person as they can do. That's not their job.
Right.
So I don't complain about it.
Not to depart, but this has actually been fascinating. But I'd be remiss if we didn't ask you a little bit about. I think you were on Celebrity Apprentice, right? So you've had dealings with the Donald, with the president-elect. So I just open it to you. What is your impression of him? Do you think he will be presidential? And how do you think that's going to go?
Let's just start with the first. What's your impression? I think the presidential question.
Well, I mean, you've had personal interaction with him, and I think everyone is wondering about this.
Yeah. So let me be really clear. I was on Celebrity Apprentice, but I knew him well for years prior to that.
Oh,
so
wow.
my perception isn't just from that show. I worked in his building when I was working with the CBS Early Show, so we would see each other in the mornings going into the building. We would chat with each other. I went to events with him. I attended events with his family. I was invited to sit on the dais at the Friars Club. I know the man. I don't know what else he could have done. I don't know of anything he possibly could have done to scream at people, do not elect, I am not qualified for this position. Don't you dare. And they did in spite of that.
So is there any space, though, between the Donald Trump that we see and the Donald Trump that that, maybe we're missing and he'll come through? Should I be optimistic?
There's lots, I think, that people are missing. He's brilliantly adept with people, warm, kind, gentle, attentive, eye contact. He's amazing in person. It's a big, big part of who he is. But what you're seeing, and so I guess ignoring the most of us, is him. He's so self-centered and so willing to, at all costs, do whatever it takes to win. So it doesn't matter. I mean, he will dismiss you regardless of your level of friendship instantly if it serves his purpose, and 5 minutes later be your best friend or talk about how wonderful or brilliant or all these crazy words that have no meaning, no basis in reality whatsoever. It's that serves his purpose.
Well, what a terrifying portrait. What a terrifying picture you paint.
Richard Hetz, thanks so much. It's really been great chatting with you. I just wanted to, in addition to being a reality show, the OG of reality shows, I think maybe the most famous reality show contestant ever, Richard's also a father and a husband and an author and a lawyer and lots of other things, and it's been a real pleasure having you on the show today, Richard.
My pleasure, guys.
Thanks a lot.
Enjoy your day.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you so much. So that was fascinating, Jason. Here's my take on what I think is going on. I mean, I think Richard painted a great picture, and it's really interesting stuff. But there's something out there in social cognitive theory called cultivation theory. There's these two professors, Gebner and Gross, at UPenn, who have really put a fine point on this. And they say the more you watch these reality shows, either consume them or are on them, the more you believe that it reflects reality, and you sort of get trapped in this bubble of reality shows. So it's destabilizing to leave it, and it's really disorienting to be inside of it, and that's what's causing. There's a correlation definitely between the misconduct and that, but I think there's a causation relationship, and people are really becoming worse, the worst versions of themselves on these shows.
You mentioned the terms cultivation theory, and I almost nodded off, but you actually brought me back in with the explanation.
I
of
looped
what that
you
was.
in.
I kind of liked it.
All right.
Thanks very much for tuning in, everybody. Again, download us from the podcast store and watch us on YouTube, and we'll see you next week.
All right, later.
Thanks for watching. If you want more nerdy deep dives into the legal side of celebrity news, hit our subscribe button right here.
And check out our previous episodes over here.